The White House says that the U.S. is sending 10 F-35 fighter jets to Puerto Rico as part of an effort to combat drug cartels.
Switching gears for now, Britain's Royal Air Force is facing sharp scrutiny as a new report has now put focus on the effectiveness and the future of its F-35 fighter jet fleet.
And now from trade to defense, Spain has shelved plans to purchase the U.S.-made F-35 fighter jets indefinitely.
Canada dumps U.S. F-35 jets for Sweden's Gripen. $17 billion deal canceled. The story spreading through defense circles tonight is not a leak, not a rumor, not a whisper from some anonymous official. It is something far more shocking, an announcement so unexpected that even seasoned analysts are calling it one of the biggest ruptures in Western air power politics in years. Hours ago, Spain stunned its allies by quietly shelving its long-anticipated plan to buy U.S.-built F-35 fighters, halting negotiations indefinitely. That decision landed with the force of a geopolitical thunderclap, sending tremors through Washington, jolting NATO, and pulling a single uncomfortable truth into full daylight. America's closest partners are reevaluating their reliance on U.S. weapons. Spain's move might have been brushed aside as an isolated policy adjustment until something even more startling emerged. For months, roads inside the Royal Air Force had whispered of growing concern about Britain's own fleet of F-35s. But the latest classified audit, now leaked, lays bare a harsh assessment. Spiraling maintenance costs, mission-limiting software restrictions, and the sobering question of whether the aircraft can meet the RAF's long-term needs. Once again, the central point wasn't the jet itself. It was the dependency baked into its design. All of this would be dramatic enough. But what unfolded today in Ottawa has now turned a series of scattered doubts into a full-blown strategic reckoning. It happened not in a grand announcement, but in the quiet expanse of Canada's north, where the sky opens in every direction and the wind carries secrets farther than sound. A new idea, barely whispered a year ago, is now echoing loudly across hangars, briefing rooms, and diplomatic backchannels. Canada, long expected to follow Washington's script and align with the F-35 program without question, has been presented with an alternative so profound it could rewrite the balance of air power across the Western alliance. Not by the United States, not by France, not by Germany, but by a coalition with brilliance in engineering, calm in diplomacy, and an uncanny sense of timing, Sweden and Britain. At the center of this shockwave is the next-generation Gripen, an aircraft once considered the clever underdog, the quiet workhorse of cold northern skies. For decades, the Gripen was admired but underestimated. Fast, efficient, reliable, but constrained. Its greatest strength also concealed its greatest vulnerability, the American engine inside it, a dependency that limited its exports and gave Washington quiet veto power over where and how the jet could operate. For nations seeking autonomy, not just capability, that was a deal-breaker. For Canada, whose Arctic sovereignty is no longer an abstract concern but a strategic priority, that dependency felt like something dangerously mismatched for its geography and politics. And then everything changed. Somewhere between a British test facility and a Swedish design lab, a possibility emerged. A Gripen variant powered not by an American engine, but by a new Rolls-Royce system. One engineered for cold weather endurance, rapid deployment, and full political independence. The concept was whispered in corridors at first, half dismissed as fantasy. But each month the idea grew sharper. Rolls-Royce teams began testing cold start cycles, Saab refined airframe integrations, and Canadian analysts quietly ran scenario after scenario. The result was not fantasy, it was a revelation. A jet capable of patrolling the Arctic from improvised runways. A jet that could be serviced in remote northern bases without the need for sprawling American logistics chains. A jet whose software, sensors, and upgrades Canada could control, not negotiate for. And a jet that could be built, assembled, and maintained at home, feeding a new aerospace ecosystem across Canadian provinces rather than foreign contractors. For months, the Canadian government publicly stayed the course. The F-35 was their plan. But the North does not care about plans. It cares about survival. It cares about readiness. It cares about jets that can launch in blizzards, land on frozen runways, and scramble on 5 minutes' notice in temperatures that ground most aircraft. When Sweden and Britain presented their joint-engine Gripen proposal to Ottawa, the tone was not aggressive, not ideological, not confrontational. It was almost understated, a simple, quiet message. Here is another path. That subtlety masked the geopolitical blast radius. Washington understood exactly what was at stake. For decades, the United States has maintained not just aerospace dominance, but aerospace dependency. Every F-35 sold is not just a fighter distributed, it is a tether, an umbilical cord of software keys, spare parts, encrypted modules, and classified data pathways that guarantee ongoing reliance on American infrastructure. A country buying an F-35 gains incredible capability, yes, but it also steps willingly into a system designed in Washington and governed by Washington. Sweden's proposal and Britain's propulsion breakthrough threaten that system more than any foreign competitor ever has. If Canada, a founding NORAD partner, the nation guarding half the Arctic frontier, chooses a non-US jet with a non-US engine, the psychological barrier is broken. Other nations are already watching nervously. Finland, who flew Gripens for decades. Poland, now pressed between Russian aggression and American expectations. Even Australia, whose strategic calculus is slowly shifting. A single decision in Ottawa could trigger a cascade. Inside the Pentagon, conversations have shifted from concern to alarm. This is not about losing a contract, it is about losing primacy. If allies see a path to sovereignty that does not run through U.S. weapon systems, what else might they reconsider? Supply chains, data sharing, defense industry partnerships, the very structure of NATO air operations? That is why, behind closed doors, pressure on Canada is intensifying. Diplomats urge caution, lobbyists hint at consequences, defense officials warn of interoperability fractures. Every lever is being pulled, quietly but unmistakably. Meanwhile, inside Canada's own military establishment, the debate is more candid. The Arctic is not Europe. It is not the Middle East. It is a world of its own, half sky, half ice, and wholly unforgiving. The F-35 is a technological marvel, but it was not designed around northern resilience. Its maintenance demands are immense. Its cold weather performance is still being tested. Its logistics train requires deep entanglement with U.S. supply systems, and its operational autonomy is, by design, limited. The Gripen with a Rolls-Royce engine is the opposite: agile, independent, Arctic-born. A fighter that can be refueled, rearmed, and relaunched with a ground crew small enough to fit in a single transport vehicle. In a region where bases are few and distances are vast, that flexibility is not a perk. It is survival. But autonomy is not only a military question, it is industrial. A sovereign fighter program would give Canada something it has not had in generations: the ability to shape its own aerospace destiny. Assembly lines in Quebec, engine maintenance hubs in Ontario, cold weather testing facilities in the Yukon. A supply chain that does not vanish during political storms in Washington. For a government increasingly focused on domestic industry and northern security, that vision has magnetic pull. And yet, the decision is not simple. Choosing the Gripen-RR partnership would send diplomatic shockwaves across the Atlantic. Questions would erupt inside NATO councils. U.S. lawmakers, already skeptical of Canadian defense spending, would bristle. Washington's defense companies, industry giants whose influence runs deeper than most realize, would mobilize like never before. Canada would need to navigate the backlash with surgical precision. But something deeper is shifting, something that goes beyond procurement spreadsheets and alliance politics. Nations are remembering that sovereignty is not something you inherit. It is something you build. And sometimes you build it one engine at a time. When the first aircraft lifts off a frosted Canadian runway, its shadow will not just cross snow, it will cross history. The hum of that engine, British in its craft and Swedish in its design, will carry a message across the Arctic sky. This nation chooses for itself. And in a world shifting beneath our feet, that may be the most powerful weapon of all.